the top part here is Pythagorean Theorem shortcut rules. Now, it's not, the Pythagorean Theorem. It's just a little shortcut thing that we do. So, if you know the C, you are going to subtract. Okay, whenever I say the C, I'm talking about in Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The C is the hypotenuse. So, for instance, what I mean is going to look like this. 8 squared subtract 6 squared. Okay, the other half of that is if you're looking for C, you're going to add. So it would look like this. 8 squared plus 6 squared. So on number 1, this x, is this x one of the legs or the hypotenuse? It's the hypotenuse, so it's the C, okay? And another way for you to remember that is this little right angle is like an arrow that's always pointing towards the hypotenuse, okay? It always points the way to the hypotenuse. So on this one, okay, with the x being here, do I know the C or am I looking for the C? I'm looking for the C. So when I'm looking for the C, I'm going to be adding, okay? So what's going to happen is I'm going to plug in 3 here. So it's going to be 3 squared and then another 3 right here. So 3 squared plus 3 squared square rooted. So it's going to be square root of 3 squared plus 3 squared. Okay, so type that in your calculator. Square root of 3 squared plus 3 squared.
4.24.
What does it give you? Very good. 4.24. I heard you. I was just waiting for somebody else to say it. You're good. Okay. Number 2, the 9x and 15. Which one of those is the C? The 15, because the 15 is the hypotenuse. Again, if you think about this little right angle mark as an arrow, it always points towards the C, towards the hypotenuse. So on this one, do we know the C or are we looking for the C? This time we know it. I know what it is. It's 15. Not like on the other one, number 1, where we were looking for it. This time I know what it is. I'm looking for another side. So when I know the C, I'm going to be subtracting. So I'm going to do 15 squared subtract, 9 squared, square rooted. What does that give you?
12.
Gives you exactly 12. Now when you do this, you have to put the 15 first. Because if you put the 9 first, it's going to give you an error. Because it's trying to take the square root of a negative number, and you can't do that to get to imaginary numbers, but we're not doing that here. So make sure you put the hypotenuse, the C, first here. Okay, number 3. Which one is the C on that one?
65.
Is the 65. Again, this arrow is pointing towards the C. So on this one, I know the C. I'm going to be subtracting, so it's going to be 65 squared minus 25 squared. What does it give you?
60.
Gives you exactly 60. Okay, let's do one more in this group. Let's do number 5. So on number 5,
You're looking for
which one is the C on this one? Is the X. It's right there. So on this one, you've got, like in a triangle, the diagonal, but basically just forget about all of this out here and just look at the triangle. And so we are looking for the C, so am I going to add or subtract? We're going to what? We're going to add. So 16, square root of 16 squared plus 33 squared. 36.67. Okay, let's talk about our 45, 45, 90 rules. All right, so on the 45, 45, 90, the leg times square root of 2 is going to give you the hypotenuse. Take this leg times square root or rad 2 gives you the hypotenuse. Now, just the reverse of that, the hypotenuse divided by square root of 2 gives you the leg. Do what?
I think that's why I focus on it. Because I got these mixed up.
Okay, and then on a 45, 45, 90, the two legs are congruent. Or they are equal. Two legs are congruent. So, on number 1, okay, this 8 right here on number 1, is this on one of the legs or the hypotenuse?
Leg.
It's a leg. So I know the leg, I'm looking for the hypotenuse. So how do I find the hypotenuse from the leg?
Times square root.
Yep. If I know the leg, I just take the leg times the square root of 2, and it's going to tell me how long the hypotenuse is. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to do 8 times the square root of 2. Okay, and it's going to give you 11.31. Okay, on number 2, that 3 square root of 2, is that the hypotenuse or one of the legs? It's the hypotenuse. Again, we got the little arrow pointing towards it. Okay, so on this one, I know the hypotenuse, and I want to find the leg from that. So when I know the hypotenuse, what do I do to find the leg? Divide by square root of 2. So I have 3 square root of 2 divided by square root of 2.
3.
Good. It's just going to give you 3. Why does that just end up being 3?
Because 2 divided by 2 is counts up 1, so it's just 3.
Exactly. Thank you. Explain that better than anybody today. Square root of 2 divided by square root of 2 is 1, and 3 times 1 is 3. So it just gives you 3. Basically, the square root of 2's cancel to 1. Okay, then I'll do one more in this group. Let's do number 5. So on number 5, the 16, is that the hypotenuse or one of the legs? It's the hypotenuse. So when I know the hypotenuse, how do I find the leg? Divide by square root of 2. And it's what? 11.31. Which in a 45, 45, 90, these two are always going to be the same. Okay, let's flip it over and talk about 30, 60, 90s for a second. Now, on this, I'm going to be abbreviating a lot here. So on a 30, 60, 90, the short leg times 2 tells you how long the hypotenuse is. And the 30, 60, 90. Okay, the short leg times the square root of 3 tells you how long the long leg is. The hypotenuse divided by 2 tells you the length of the short leg. And then the long leg divided by the square root of 3 tells you how long the short leg is. Okay, so those are the rules. I'm going to skip number 1. Let's look at number 2. On number 2, which one of those is the H, the hypotenuse? The Y is the hypotenuse. Which one is the short leg? The 8. And which one is the long leg? The X, obviously. Okay, so on this one, what I'm starting off with knowing is the short leg. Okay, I know the short leg is 8. So from the short leg, I want to find the hypotenuse and the long leg. So going back up here to my rules, I'm going to start off with this top one to get the hypotenuse. So when I know the short leg, how can I find the hypotenuse? Just multiply by 2. It's just double. So if the short leg is 8, how long is the hypotenuse going to be? 16. 8 times 2 is 16. Okay? So I just do 8 times 2, and so that gives me 16 for the hypotenuse. Now from the short leg to the long leg, okay, short leg to the long leg, I do short leg times square root of 3 to give me the long leg. So, yep, 8 is the length of the short leg, so I'm going to do 8 times square root of 3. So I'm going to go 8 times square root of 3. And what does that give me? 13.86. Okay, number 3, which one is the H, the hypotenuse? It's 11. Which one's the short leg? Is the X, and then obviously Y is the long leg. So on this one, I'm starting off by knowing the hypotenuse. So looking back to my rules, there's only one of these rules that has the H to start off with. So that's the only one I can do here. So to get from the hypotenuse to the short leg, what do I do? Just divide it by 2. So I'm going to do 11 divided by 2 is going to be half of 11, which is 5.5. Now, from the short leg to the long leg, what do? Times square root of 3. So I'm going to do 5.5 times square root of 3. What does that give you?
9.5. Oh my gosh. This is oh my
9.53. Okay, number 5. Number 5, which one is the H?
The
Y. Which one's the short leg? And then the long leg is 12. So on this one, I'm starting off with knowing the long leg. So I've got to get to the short leg and hypotenuse from there. So back to my rules, there's only one of these that gets me that starts with the long leg. It's that bottom one. Divide by the square root of 3. So I'm going to do 12 divided by the square root of 3.
6.93.
Okay. All right, now from the short leg to the hypotenuse, what do we do?
13.4.
Okay. All right, guys, that's enough. 6.93 times 2 is going to give us the hypotenuse. What is that?
13.86.
Okay, it's 13.86. Okay, and then for the last little thing is simplifying radicals. So in your calculator, when you type in menu 23, okay, it's going to bring up this function, and it's going to say factor whenever you type that in your calculator. And it's going to bring up parentheses. So like on number 1, we're going to put a 75 in there, not the square root of 75. Don't put the square root symbol, just the number that's inside. So when I factor 75, it's going to look like this in your calculator. It's going to say 3 times 5 with the 2 like that. So what does that mean whenever it says 3 times 5 squared? There's 2 5s. Good. So what's going to happen here is we're going to have a 3 and we're going to have 2 5s. So what do we do with that? Yep. You group the 5 or the pairs. And so in this case, it's a pair of 5s. So there's a 5 on the outside, a 3 on the inside. And that's the simplified version of rad 75. It's 5 squared root of 3. Okay, how does 18 break down? A 2 and 2 3s. Okay, so we got a pair of 3's out here, so it's 3 square root of 2. All right, and then on the last one, how does 150 break down?
2, 3, and 5, 2.
Yep, 2, 3, and then a 5 and a 5. So there's a pair of 5s, so that one pair comes out. Now, the 2 and the 3 didn't have a pair to pair up with. And when we say pair, it has to be the exact same thing. So the 2 didn't have a pair to go with it. The 3 didn't have a pair. So everything that's left just gets multiplied back together, and so there's just going to be a 6 left underneath there.